On the 16th of July, 1969, Apollo 11 launched for an 8-day journey to the surface of the moon and back. This accomplishment marked the progress of years of dedicated efforts and centuries of human progress in technology, science, and mathematics. And one of the most central yet technically challenging achievements in this progress was planning the trajectory from the Earth to the moon. Science fiction literature usually depicts spacecraft as constantly utilizing their thrusters for propulsion and maneuvering, but the Apollo 11 spacecraft, and in fact nearly everything that humans launch into space, only used its thrusters for relatively brief periods. Most space travel is unpowered, relying on trajectories determined by momentum and gravity. So, launching a spacecraft to the moon is really more like tossing a ball to a friend than it is like flying an airplane. When you want to toss a ball to a friend, you can't aim directly at your friend because you have to account for gravity and the motion of your friend. The presence of gravity means that you have to throw the ball at a slight angle upward and you need to give it a little extra speed. The resulting trajectory is called a parabola and will reach your friend if you give the ball the right speed and angle. And if your friend is moving, you have to aim for where they're going to be, not where they are when you toss the ball. When aiming for the moon, we have to make two very similar adjustments. We have to account for gravity and the motion of the moon. That's why Apollo 11 used a maneuver called the Trans-Lunar Injection, which comes in 3 stages. The first stage of Apollo 11's journey was a low orbit around the Earth at an altitude of just under 200 kilometers. Although humans place satellites into orbit around the Earth on a regular basis now, in 1969 this was still a relatively recent accomplishment. Orbiting the Earth at a constant altitude requires that a spacecraft reach orbit at just the right speed so that it follows the curvature of the Earth as it moves under the pull of the Earth's gravity. In a sense, an orbiting spacecraft is always falling, just never hitting the surface of the Earth. If the speed of a spacecraft trying to orbit the Earth is too low, it falls too quickly and returns to the surface of the Earth. This, of course, is a good thing to do when you want to land and are prepared to do so, but not so great for starting out a trip to the moon. On the other hand, if the speed of a spacecraft is too high, it flies away from the Earth before turning around under the influence of gravity. It still orbits the Earth, but the altitude and speed are no longer constant. Remember, the spacecraft's engines are not being used in these trajectories. They're only moving under the influence of gravity and momentum. After completing 1.5 orbits around the Earth, Apollo 11 began the Trans-Lunar Injection with a rocket burn that lasted nearly 6 minutes. This increase in speed pushed Apollo 11 out of low Earth orbit and into a very elliptical trajectory. Remember how you have to adjust for gravity when throwing a ball to a friend? Well, the reason for this rocket burn is exactly the same. Apollo 11 needed to be pushed up against Earth's gravity to get out to the moon. And remember how you have to aim that ball for where your friend will be instead of where they are? Well, Apollo 11 had to do the same thing by initiating the Trans-Lunar Injection at a specific point along its orbit around the Earth to aim for the moon using an elliptical trajectory. If the rocket burn happened just a few degrees earlier or later in Apollo 11's trajectory, it would have missed the moon entirely. Firing the thrusters at just the right moment allowed Apollo 11 to reach the moon at an altitude it could orbit. The journey to the moon ended with Apollo 11 making another burn of its engines to bring it to the right speed to orbit around the moon for about 3 days. Of course, this orbit is a bit more complicated than the orbit around the Earth, since the moon itself is orbiting around the Earth. But the same idea holds. The spacecraft needed to move at just the right speed to always move forward as it fell toward the moon. If the orbiter moved too quickly or too slowly, it could find itself left behind by the moon or flying much too close to the surface. I hope you've enjoyed this video. All the animations here were created on glowscript.org, a free-to-access programming platform that uses the simple and versatile VPython library. To learn more about these animations and how you can use VPython, see the links in the description below.